Do you ever notice how sometimes you're just sitting there and you're in a YouTube video and you're like, how did I get here? Did I click on this guy? You didn't. You're not really here. I'm controlling your dreams. This is YouTube Inception. I'm John Stark. Please subscribe because I'm ridiculous and nonsensical and blind. So, like, 3 things right there. There you go. And we're going to talk about Inception. And we're going to talk about it in a way that I haven't talked about a film yet, which is I own this thing on DVD, and I watched it on DVD. And it doesn't have audio description. It does have Espanol. So if you Espanol, if you hablo Espanol, then you're good. But no, it doesn't have anything interesting. You could like director's commentary. I have the version that just, when they dropped it on DVD, I went out and grabbed it. And didn't have anything fancy on it. I'm sure there's a version of Inception by now that's just loaded with special features. The 4K Ultra loaded with Leonardo DiCaprio commentary. But yeah, so I watched this because I'm a guest on an upcoming podcast where we were talking about Christopher Nolan, and I wanted to rewatch Christopher Nolan films, and Inception is not currently on a streaming platform without buying it on VOD or renting it, which is ridiculous because I own it. I just don't own it with audio description, which is really frustrating, which goes back to my whole thing about how film companies really probably should think more about audio description, so that way it's weird that my physical media doesn't have audio description. Like, I spend so much time talking about audio description on streaming services and theaters that I think people don't realize that also if we buy the DVD or we rent it from a library, we're still not guaranteed to have audio description. And Inception is a mess without audio description. It's literally unwatchable, but I'm going to put this under my 40 for 40 banner, which means I'm reviewing 40 of my favorite films of all time, which is true of Inception. So it's going to end up getting an A+ anyway, because that's the whole purpose of me actually saying what 40 of my favorite films of all time are. It's weird that Christopher Nolan is populating that list a lot, like, because I'm also having to review a lot of Chris Nolan films. But that's life. But hard talk. What's this film about? Well, we've got DiCaprio. And he's here. And he's trying to revenant his way to an Oscar nomination as Cobb. A man who is skilled in the very special art of dream sharing, getting inside your head with you, and how he can manipulate that and make it him and his team make it seem like it's just this totally real experience, and they can have a conversation with you. This is because a lot of times, I guess, in the world of Inception, people like to try to kidnap rich people and get in their dreams. So they have to have dream security. So he's trying to help people figure out how to be secure in their dreams and or steal something from somebody's dream, depending on the gig, depending on what he's being paid to do. In this case, Ken Watanabe wants to use him, wants to see how good he is. And he's got a gig for him. It involves Cillian Murphy. He wants DiCaprio to plant an idea. He wants DiCaprio to do Inception, which is to plant an idea in the dreams of somebody so that way they believe it's their idea. However, in this world, DiCaprio believes that cannot be done. He's like, it's impossible. Damn it, I'm going to do it anyway. Otherwise, the movie would end right now. It would be really short and boring. So, of course, he takes the job. And he and his team, which include, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Tom Hardy, they prepare for this Inception. He has to go and get a new architect, though, because DiCaprio is haunted by his dead ex, played by Marion Cotillard, who pops up actually quite frequently for a dead ex in the film. And we also get a nice little cameo from Michael Caine. Michael Caine is in another Chris Nolan film. They're buddies. They're buds. Good friends. And Ellen Page at the time, now Elliot Page. So confusing. Because it's a female character, obviously. So I'm gonna go with Ellen Page because that is what Elliot was called at the time. Although I do respect his gender now. I don't know what to do with this, okay? I don't know. Cause anyway, yes. Great performance from Page as the sort of architect of the whole thing. And also this is one of those sort of formats where in order to explain the world, you have somebody who's brand new in it. It's like the Training Day, like Day One. Cop shows use this a lot, where you have a rookie who's there on their first day, and it's how they use their pilot is to show you from the rookie's perspective of joining the force. But it works here too because Paige has absolutely no idea what's going on, and so Cobb has to constantly explain things to her. It allows for that natural feel of exposition instead of forced exposition where he just has to stand there and explain something to somebody for no apparent reason whatsoever. But here he's actually sort of going over the rules of how this thing works with somebody who's never done it and is supposed to do it. And comes highly recommended from Michael Caine as being a potential architect. And that is how we learn all about this world and how to build it and how things fall apart. And this is a visual beast of a film. I've seen this actually multiple times before I lost my vision. This is definitely a film I was really interested in seeing with audio description. Unfortunately, the timing just wasn't right for me, so I get to talk about why it needs audio description. And oh my god, the reasons are everywhere. Like, everything is a reason. This is one of those times where there's so much that happens in the film where as cool as it would be to know what they're wearing, I think it's like the least important thing. So many people are like, what do these characters look like? What are they wearing? And I'm like, that building behind them is like folding over. You know, I mean, we don't have time to talk about what they're doing, what they're looking like. Because there's some times where there's something that's so utterly bizarre that's happening because it's happening in this dream world sequence where... And so things happen sort of suddenly because in a dream you can just sort of pop something up. So things just sort of crash in or just suddenly, and you don't really know what it is without audio description. You're like, what is this? Did a train just come through here? Yeah. You know, I mean, like, yes. So there are plenty of times like that in the film where because the film is so uniquely designed, and Nolan is somebody who really loves to use practical effects, so he's the kind of guy that builds like a mini set and tries to shoot it that way. He's also the guy, and I saw sort of like a making of, there's a rigging sequence with Joseph Gordon-Levitt where he's fighting in this hallway, and it's, for those of us when we were able to see, probably saw that used in the trailer because it was nuts. And it's like, how are they doing that? You know, it's the kind of thing nowadays that somebody would get lazy and they would just green screen. He actually built a rigging that rotated. So they actually were rotating along with, I think they still had wires and stuff for safety, and then they had to digitally edit out the wires. But Nolan really loves to actually do things and build things. That's why his films are expensive, but that's also why his films look so phenomenally great. And I'm talking about looks, and I'm a blind film critic. So it's like, how am I telling a blind audience what this film is like, uh, and getting them to understand what's special. And it's the concept, and it's what he does with it. The actors and the performances are all good. They're interchangeable. There's nobody here was nominated for anything, and I'm not mad about it. Like, I'm not mad that anybody wasn't nominated. I think probably of everybody, DiCaprio and Cotillard probably have the strongest performances in terms of anything that might have come close to getting an awards nomination. But when you look at their bodies of work, it's really hard to say that this is up there for them. The star of the feature is the visual effects. It's the plot. It's the story that they're telling. The concept takes precedent over anything else here. It's very odd that that this DVD has no audio description. That they sent this out for, because it's like blind people watch movies at home too. This isn't even that old. This was like 2008. So like it's not even an old film and it doesn't have audio description. So, yeah, why not? Like, why don't these films have audio description? Why is this a thing? Why was nobody caring enough to put it even on the home video release? Because it's very likely that when it was in theaters, that this had audio description. At this time, I was handing out, personally, I know when I was working in movie theaters, I was handing out boxes, audio description boxes, so I know audio description existed. They were kind of crappy and didn't always work, but I was handing them out. So why did this not make it to the DVD? It's just a kind of a really relevant question. I love Inception, though. I think it's definitely, as the people in my podcast will find out, it's in my top 5, and it's also a 40 for 40 for me. And it's like, the weird thing about Nolan is that he has so many desert island films for me. I try not to fanboy all over him, and there are things of his that I'm not a fan of. But man, he has such a high success rate with me. It's like he speaks to me in almost every single project. And with extreme accuracy too. And not just like a little bit, but I end up loving a lot of Nolan's films. I've seen Inception several times. I just think it's ridiculous to watch it without audio description. So, to a blind and visually impaired audience, I would say, fuck no. Do not watch this without audio description if you've never seen the film before. If you've seen the film before and you're like me and you're on either side, it's not a fun watch. It's not going to do anything for you. You're going to totally miss out on all of the great things because none of them are described. This film is... You'll actually realize how visual the film is. The one thing that I will say about these kinds of experiences when I watch films that don't have audio description, but I'm watching them anyway, is sometimes I really rediscover the sound design and the score. And Inception has tremendous sound design and score. Coming out of Oppenheimer, now I'm watching Inception. Inception has better sound design than Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, even... I'm trying to give it a pass because I saw Oppenheimer in theaters when I've seen most of my films on TV now. So I'm trying to not hammer it too much for its sound design, for being aggressively loud in scenes where it didn't need to be. Inception chooses its loudness in scenes where it needs to be loud. And it actually, because of that, I feel like it actually lets its score flourish more. It comes out more than it does necessarily in Oppenheimer. I felt like almost the sound design really distracted from the score because there was so much just loud noises. Very interesting. It's definitely something that Nolan really loves to play with, is his sound design. I think he really spends a lot of time thinking about all of these different sounds, and it's very atypical of other directors and how they design the sound for their films. Listening to a Nolan film is very different than listening to like a Spielberg film. So a lot of times Nolan uses these, like horns and um, like just loud bass and all this other kind of stuff. And some other directors prefer to go for more of like a naturalistic. But there's a lot of what Nolan does with his sound design that doesn't feel naturalistic at all. But it's still damn impressive. um, Anyway, I love Inception. My DVD doesn't have audio description, which means your DVD probably doesn't have audio description. And that's the world we live in. So, without further ado, even though I could talk about Inception for hours, I'm going to tap out. Because there's really not much else to say. I mean, you can't understand anything. Like, people get shot and they're on the brink. And the biggest thing is, and this is, close your ears for a second if you're worried about spoilers, is the most annoying thing is the top. And I really wanted to know about the audio description for the final sequence in the film. And that is something I was really curious about. And I know at some point, because I love Inception too much, I will watch it when it is somewhere with audio description, presuming that service has audio description for it. I really want to know what the audio description did with the final shot in the film. Does it suggest? Because then it has to acknowledge, because that's been something that's been greatly debated, is what does that mean? What does that final shot mean in the film? And some people say they can see it, some people don't see it, so to acknowledge it in the audio description, I think would be incredibly interesting, because then it would confirm what a lot of people's theories are about Inception. So anyway, that's a great reason, and it's also a really hard to interpret, because it's like a blind audience doesn't get to make up that opinion for themselves. They're being told something by an audio description narrator, whereas the entire sighted community was sitting there analyzing the absolute ever-loving shit out of the final shot of this film. Oh my god, like, Google, I'm sure YouTube has like thousands of videos of people talking about the final shot of Inception. Just that. Just not even the whole film. Just debating about what that shot means. And if you can't, it's like participating in is the dress gold or blue? It's like, well, if somebody auto describes it for you, how is that something we participate in? How do we choose that? How do we make the choice? I remember it, but I don't know somebody who's congenitally blind has never been able to see when they finally sit down and watch Inception. I don't know that they really care, and I'm sure they'd love to hear somebody's debate about it, but it's such an interesting shot because it was obviously intentional from Nolan. So what does that all mean? Anyway, that's it. I said I was going to give it an A+. I'm giving Inception an A+. It's a 40 for 40 film for me. And yes, I'm 40. Somebody thought I had food on my lip. It's not. It's a lip piercing because I still think of myself as a child. I think I'm going to have it all the way till I'm like an old senior citizen. Just, can you get my cane? I'm still going to have it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'm always here to talk audio description and the experiences of blind people watching films. So please subscribe. I need more followers for people to care what I have to say about expanding audio description. And I have a website, macmovieguy.com. You can go to Twitter, Instagram, or Threads and follow me at MacMovieGuy. You can go to the Audio Description Project, adp.acb.org, where you can see what has audio description, where you can watch it. And you can go to the ADNA.org, that's the ADNA.org, and it'll let you know who is narrating your favorite films and television series. That's it for me today. I will review something else, and so you guys on the outside. I don't know what that voice was, but it was interesting. I'm going to use it again sometime.